Welcome back, nerds. My name is Ruben with Nerdspace, and here today I'm taking a look at Unholy. This game is a game that I was actually kind of excited for. My expectations for this game were kind of low, not gonna lie. However, with me being a huge horror fan, obviously I was going to play this game, and I was actually kind of excited for it. The trailer made it seem like that this game was going to be a very psychological horror type game where you're going to have a lot of atmospheric horror, and the environment was going to have some scary elements to it. So I was really excited about this game based off of the trailers. And before I dive into the details of this review, let's talk about what this game is supposed to be about, as it focuses on a mother who is looking for her son that was brought into the afterlife, and she has to battle through some cult members and some monsters and some different types of creatures using unique abilities to get to her son and get him back. And that's pretty much what this game is about. And like I said earlier, I was really excited for this game. I love my terrifying horror experiences. It looked like I was going to get a few scares out of this. It looks like it was going to be a lot of fun. The combat seemed interesting enough. I was interested. I was intrigued. Unfortunately, it was bad. It was really bad. Let's just jump straight into it. Let's start with the gameplay. First off, the concept for the gameplay actually seemed interesting because it combines a lot of different types of abilities. One with a mask, one with a slingshot. You have different upgradable abilities to help your character be a little bit more powerful and more fluent through the combat and the gameplay of the game. So with all of these different abilities, it seemed like it was going to be interesting enough. Not to mention you were being thrown into the afterlife, which means you can potentially come across some really scary and terrifying and creative creatures, since this is the afterlife. I mean, sure, you were going to be battling against some cult members, but it's still the afterlife, and you expect that there's going to be a lot of different types of monsters in here. So let's first take a look at the slingshot, because that is probably one of the most important tools at your disposal in this game. So the slingshot actually has 4 different ammo types that allows you to shoot different emotions used as bullets in this game. So for example, Desire actually has the ability where if you shoot the bullet, it shoots a yellow bubble, and then the monsters become obsessed with this bubble and head over to this space where this yellow Desire bubble is at. And it basically distracts any monsters, but not just the monsters, it actually distracts the cult members too. So it's a very useful item if you wanted to sneak past some of the creatures and enemies of the game. There's another bullet that allows you to shock electrical currents and electrical boxes and stuff, or set off explosions and stuff like that. But for the most part, there's 4 different types of bullets, and none of them are extremely exciting. I know they might seem crazy and pretty awesome, but the combat system in this game kind of made it to where you're pretty much using one most of the time, except for where you have to use the other ones to get through specific parts. The 2 I found myself using the most was Desire and the Shock one, because Desire, I can lead the enemies towards an explodable device of some sort, like a tank, and the shock bullet will set off that explosion so I can kill the enemy. However, the other 2 are pretty much useless other than just trying to get through different obstacles throughout the game. Actually, the one that like creates like a smoke screen, I don't think I ever actually used, except for the one time where you have to use it in order to get past this light. Other than that, I barely ever touched that. I see the benefit of using it because it creates like a smoke screen, but in my opinion, once I got the Desire bullet, like that pretty much trumped the smoke screen every single time. Why would I create a smoke screen where I can sneak by when I could just send a Desire bullet and just completely not have to worry about what the monster or enemy is doing? So I felt like the bullets definitely contradicted each other. I felt like I didn't really need both the smoke screen and the Desire one, but if they were going to do the smoke screen one, then maybe they should do more forced elements. Like, I really like to create a door that you have to get through with the smoke screen one. The first time you get the bullet, in order to get through this door, you have to use this smoke screen ability. If there were some more puzzles that kind of like force you to do situations like that, then I would have actually really liked it a little bit more, and I would understand why we had that at our disposal. The slingshot is not the only tool that gives you different abilities. There's also your mask, which actually can equip with 3 different abilities that you get throughout the game, and they are known as the Servant, the Sister, and the Guard. But here's the thing, honestly, none of them are really that impressive. Actually, I'm really confused as to why like one mask wasn't just given all of these abilities, because for example, I feel like the Servant and the Guard ability are almost identical. Basically, the servant mask allows you to be able to see any interactive items that you can pick up, explode, stuff like that, whereas the guard mask allows you to see invisible enemies. So I feel like they're essentially the same thing, just for different uses, and I feel like they were kind of pointless. I just don't understand the point of having the mask. I feel like the mask mechanic was something that could have been really cool and really fun if they had a lot more different abilities attached to them. But other than blocking the plague and seeing items and enemies, there was no point in having them in the game at all, honestly. Now, there are upgradable abilities, but if you're thinking this is going to be like on the level of BioShock or a game similar to that, you are sorely mistaken, because there's about 6 abilities, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But the fact of the matter is that really all of them are kind of pointless, except for maybe 2 of them. The only ones I found myself using, but by the time I did start using it, it was near the end game, was the fact that you could have more ammunition in your pack, and the fact that you were able to reload your slingshot a lot faster. Other than that, the slide ability, all the different other abilities on there, they were all pretty much pointless and useless. I didn't need them. And once again, similar to the mask, I felt like they were kind of useless at being there. Like the slide mechanic. What benefit is that? Like what benefit does this slide mechanic have? Yeah, sure, it looks cool, but it doesn't really have any type of use at all, other than getting you through a specific place. Similar to the actually smoke screen earlier that I talked about, it helped you get through a specific place, but other than that, you don't really use a slide ability ever again. Which, while we're talking about different puzzles and getting through them, let's talk about the puzzles actually. Let's focus on what different types of puzzles you can expect in this game. As I mentioned, there are some creative things like I really like. For example, I thought the smoke screen, getting past the light through the door, the smoke screen puzzle, that was pretty cool. I know that was a little tutorial section, but I wish there was more of that, because that actually was pretty fun. But a majority of the puzzles, and this is gonna hurt me to say, guys, because when I play my horror games, especially my survival horror games and my psychological horror games, one of the most important things to me are the puzzles, because I feel like the intensity that you're going through when you're trying to solve these different puzzles, as the horror atmosphere is surrounding you and it's making it that much more difficult to solve, is a big part. However, the puzzles are pretty much the same thing throughout, just with different codes. It's pretty much either a box with a turntable type of puzzle, or a door with a 4-digit code puzzle, which usually in almost every single scenario, the code to these doors are on a piece of paper directly next to the door. It's kind of obnoxious, actually. I really just don't see the point of them even doing these puzzles, honestly. So with the gameplay, I already talked about the different abilities, I talked about the puzzles. Let's talk about the controls, because that is also a big part when it comes to any kind of game, actually. And I gotta say, the controls are kind of clunky. Your character kind of moves at the pace of a tortoise for some reason. Like, when your character walks, they barely move, and when they run, it feels like you're maybe speed walking because you're not moving that quick. And that's kind of important for a game like this, when you have to outrun monsters and you have to get away from monsters, especially in some cases there are invisible creatures in here. So yeah, the whole running mechanic was a big issue for me trying to play through this game. I cannot tell you how many times I tried to run and like I still got killed because my character just barely moved. And I found myself trying to jump up on different obstacles while I'm being chased, but because of the clunky controls, I couldn't get up on top of a specific ledge or something. Therefore, you have those enemies right behind my ass, and yeah, you bet they definitely got me. And of course, one of the most brutal things about this game are the checkpoints. They don't seem to understand that their game is a chore to get through, because some of the most stressful parts of the game, some of the biggest, longest parts of the game, apparently they thought it was a good idea to put the checkpoint at the beginning of the whole segment. I'm not going to go too much into details because one of the parts I'm talking about is near the end, but in the final stage of the game, there's a bunch of different monsters and you're getting this like minecart through the level, and it's a long portion and there's a lot of different steps you have to take in order to get through this segment. However, one mistake and you start at the very beginning of that segment. And that was no fun, guys. I don't understand why that checkpoint was so far back. And I literally dropped the controls and I just stopped playing after I died, each time I died, because I'm like, oh God, I don't want to do all that again. And before I move on to some of the different elements of the game, One last thing I want to mention about the gameplay is the fact that there's only 4 real enemy variations. You pretty much have your typical monsters, like zombie-like monsters. You have the cult members, guards. You have the sisters that really, I don't know if they actually do anything. I think they're supposed to call over the guards towards you, but honestly, they just felt like placeholders. They never really bothered me at all. And then finally, you had an invisible zombie. Yeah, which sounds really cool, and actually I will say had some really cool moments, because there's parts where I was walking through the game and they would just suddenly pop up and they would get me with a cheap jump scare, which I was okay with. I like cheap jump scares, but the pain in the ass with dealing with them is that in order to stop them, you have to get them to like some kind of device that you can blow up so you can kill them, because that's how you kill pretty much any enemy in this game, is that you got to get them close to an item that kind of blows up when you shoot it, and that's how you kill the enemies. The problem is with the invisible enemies is that you have to wear the specific mask, the guard mask, in order to see these invisible enemies. And by doing so, you now can't use the slingshot unless you remove the mask. So you can't use the guard mask and the slingshot at the same time, which means you can't see the enemies and shoot at the enemies at the same time. Do you see the problem here? Do you see the issue I am having with this decision here? But you know what, with any psychological horror game, I can get past poor gameplay. I've done it with plenty of horror games, as long as it has a decent story and the horror itself really hits me. So the question is, does this game have a decent enough story where it makes it interesting enough for you guys to purchase it? And can you find yourself actually getting scared in this game? Because that's probably why I signed up to play this game. That's probably why I bought this game, was so I can get scared, because the trailers made this game look like it was going to be pretty terrifying to play. Well, let's jump into that, shall we? Because with the story, I'm going to say straight off, the story is meh. It's just bad. It's really bad. It's boring. It's a chore to get through. It's extremely predictable in my opinion. Again, gonna avoid spoilers, but honestly, there's not really any big huge surprise or blind sides coming up. There's one little surprise at one specific point that was kind of mentioned and then brushed over and never really explored at all again. If you're interested in knowing what I'm talking about, head up the comments, I'll let you know, but that's about it. And of course, it didn't help that the dialogue was cheesy as hell and the acting was god awful. I swear the main character sounded like a dying animal for like 90% of this game. Like, no joke, I'm serious when I say that. So though the concept and the premise of the game seems interesting enough, and that definitely pulled me in, like the concept of the game, just the whole fact of going to the afterlife and potentially battling cult members and different variations of monsters seems intriguing. The execution was not there. The story was bland. The characters were not interesting at all. A majority of the characters were covered by masks, so you really didn't even get to see a lot of the characters. Other than the main character, the old lady and the son, there are no other face characters in this game actually. But like I said, you know, I could forgive poor gameplay as long as the story or the horror is good. So did this game scare me? Was it a good psychological horror or survival horror experience? And once again, I'm gonna say maybe kind of So this game is labeled as a psychological horror, and I will say it does have some really good atmospheric horror, and the environment looks really good and definitely fits what they're going for. The problem is with the monster variations and the fact that they're just really poor AIs and they're just not that intimidating other than the ones that do the jump scare because they're invisible. It's not really that scary of a game. I will say Chapter 2 definitely got me pretty good. Chapter 2 actually made me nervous playing through the game, and honestly, if the rest of the game was similar to the vibe of Chapter 2, I probably could see myself liking this game a little bit more, because Chapter 2 got me excited for it. I'm like, okay, wow, okay, this is starting to look like it's going to be impactful. It's looking like it's going to be really good. I can't wait to dive down into this. And then from that point, it just kind of drops and keeps going downhill, downhill, downhill to where it's like more of a B movie than an actual horror, psychological horror experience. And that sucks because that seems like a missed opportunity with the afterlife. You have the afterlife. You can get as creative as hell with the monster variations, some really gruesome, terrifying looking creatures. And they decided to go with some basic zombie looking monsters. and 90% of the enemies were cult members, either carrying around lanterns or wearing suits of armor. That's the extent of the enemy variations in this game. Okay, so let's start wrapping up and start moving towards the final verdict. What do I like about this game? What are my favorite parts about this game before I give my number on this? Well, I like the concept and the idea of the game, though it wasn't really executed that well. I like the atmospheric core, especially in chapter 2, but from that point, like I mentioned earlier, it kind of dropped down and kind of moved away from that atmospheric core. And I will say it does have a low price tag, and I was very happy about that. However, the game is extremely short, and with the game not being good or fun to play at all, I think it might not even be worth the $25 price tag either. So with all of that taken into consideration, it breaks my heart to give a horror game such a low score, but I gotta give this game a 3 out of 10. I know that is crazy, and honestly, it kills me because I was excited for this game. Sure, my expectations were not like through the roof, but the game seemed like it was gonna be interesting enough. But a lower price tag doesn't justify how bad this game is. It's not fun at all. The combat, the gameplay, the clunky controls make it a chore just to get through this game. I found myself like pushing myself through the edge through the final segments of the game. I'm like, please let it end because I don't want to do this to myself anymore. That's how much I did not like playing this game, especially towards the latter half of the game. Honestly, I probably would have liked this game more if it was just an Outlast or Amnesia clone where it was just kind of more of a stealth game, because all the combat, all the gameplay elements where you had to fight the monsters were the parts that really annoyed the hell out of me. I'd rather just play the whole stealth and just dodge and hide from the monsters. I don't know why they included the mask abilities or the slingshot abilities, because honestly, they were not that exciting, and while they did seem interesting enough, it just definitely didn't hit the mark for me. But that's gonna do it for this episode of Nerd Space. Guys, hit up the comments, let me know, do you agree with my review of this game? Have you played it yet? After hearing my pretty trashy review of this game, are you going to play it now? Hit up the comments, let me know. Of course, subscribe for more gaming news and gaming content, including some list videos that I love doing for the channel. But without further ado, guys, thank you for joining me on this episode, and as always, I'll see you on the next episode of Nerd Space. Take care.